Hello students. Now I'm going to talk about hormones. Hormones are also known as chemical messengers that you must have read earlier. So they are present in our body and they are secreted by certain organs known as what the endocrine glands. Endocrine glands as in they are the ductless glands. So basically they are secreted in our blood and then blood carries them to the different organs and those organs are known as target organs. Okay, so they're produced someplace else, their effect is someplace else, and how they get transported, they get mixed with the blood, and they're highly specific in nature. So hormones again can be further classified like in three categories. It can be steroid hormones, which are mostly basically all the sex hormones, both male and female. They can be peptide hormone because the peptide bond is present between them, and either they can be amine hormone as the name suggests because there is an amine group attached to it. Now when I say peptide bond, peptide is a very simple bond over there. It is simply like whenever the carbonyl compound and NH, this is the basic peptide bond. So this bond has to be present over there. We call it what the peptide. This bond is peptide bond, and if the hormone contains such bonds in it, it is peptide hormone. Now the first hormone which I've discussed, I told you that like all the sex hormones, mostly all of the sex hormones are nothing but the steroid hormones. So steroid hormone has a very basic structure. It is like little bit like extra details over there. So this is the basic framework of steroid hormones. There are 4 rings like this and 1 pentagon ring. So this is the basic backbone known as what the steroid nucleus, and the modification of this structure give you the different hormones. Steroids, alcohols are known as for the sterols, and one of the very famous sterols is cholesterol. So again, when I talk about cholesterol itself is not a hormone, but it is the starting product of almost all these steroid hormones. So cholesterol is also present like in our cell membrane and everything. So now let's go like little bit deeper, like more into it. We'll be discussing steroids, like all like 3-4 hormones of steroids. We'll be discussing about peptide hormones, and then we'll be discussing about amine hormones. Now let's talk about steroid hormones. One more detail, by the way, I can add in this topic of hormones. First of all, they're required like in they're required like in a very minute quantity, and they cannot be stored in our body. So they has to be continuously produced. So and little disproportion, like little bit more or little bit less of hormone, their effects are basically very large. So they has to be present like in very right amount, in very minute amount. Any less production or more production have a very high consequences in our body. Now let's again come back into steroid hormones. So steroid hormones can be divided like into 2 categories. One is sex hormone, one is adrenal cortex hormone. And sex hormones again can, like we are male and female, right? In our human species. So we have like androgens. Androgens are mostly all the male hormones, and the most important one of them is the testosterone. It is produced inside the testicles and it controls the secondary sexual characteristics, the primary sexual characteristics of male, and that is it. That is a very brief part of it, and I think that is sufficient, at least from the chemistry point of view. The detailed version of it is of course present in the bio version, but this much is enough like from this subject point of view. Then we have estrogen. Estrogen is present is produced in ovary, and as androgen controls the male sexual characteristics, estrogen controls the female sexual characteristics. So that is estrogen. And then we have progesterone. Now progesterone is basically is needed mainly during the pregnancy. So what happens is during the when the ovarian follicle is a follicle out of which ovules come. Ovules means ovum comes. So the remnant of the ovarian follicle turns itself into corpus luteum, and they produce this hormone called progesterone, and this hormone is needed mostly during the pregnancy. Then the second part of the steroids is the steroid hormones is the adrenal cortex hormones. So they are produced by the adrenal cortex, and adrenal glands are basically present above the kidney. And adrenal gland itself can be like, can be seen, they have the 2 parts. One is the outer part and one is the central part. Central part is known as what the medulla, and outer part is known as what the adrenal cortex. So these hormones are produced from the adrenal cortex region. They basically control the metabolism of fats, carbs, proteins, and also the water and mineral intake in our body. Now let's talk about peptide hormones. We call them peptide hormones because peptide bond is present in them. So there are like four important peptide hormones, you can say. First one is insulin, then we have oxytocin, then we have vasopressin, and then we have angiotensin 2. I'll give you a very brief idea about like all these four hormones. So insulin in our body is basically produced in pancreas, and it basically lowers the body or blood sugar level, you can say. If the person is not releasing sufficient amount of insulin, that person might be suffering from diabetes. Okay, I think that is like good enough for it. Now let's talk about oxytocin. Oxytocin is basically produced by the posterior part of the pituitary gland. This is like a very important gland. It produces like a lot of hormones. Pituitary gland is basically present in the center part of the head, you can say. And pituitary hormone and the posterior part of this gland produces this hormone called oxytocin. Its primary functionality comes into the picture when the female is giving birth to the child. So it contracts the uterus wall and help the baby to come out. Okay, now let's talk about vasopressin. Vasopressin is also produced by the posterior part of the pituitary gland, and it is basically a vasodilator. So it helps in the absorption of water in kidney. And then we have angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is present in the blood already, especially to the patients who are suffering from high blood pressure. It's a potent vasoconstrictor. It constricts the blood vessels or capillaries, you can say, and it is primarily present in the patients who are suffering from high blood pressure. And now the third category of hormones are known as what the amine hormones. We call them amine hormones because amine group is present in them. Amine is simply NH2 group. And there are two important amine hormones we have in our body. One is adrenaline and one is thyroxine. Both the hormones are of course like very important. So let's talk about the adrenaline hormone. Adrenaline hormone is produced by the medulla part of the adrenal gland, and adrenal glands, as I think mentioned earlier, it is present on the upper part of the kidney, of both the kidneys. Now this adrenaline hormone is also known as what the fight and flight hormone, because in the situation whether you have to fight a particular situation or condition, like suppose some lion comes up suddenly in front of you or some snake comes up suddenly in front of you, or either you will fight the situation or you'll run away from the situation. So in those you need a sudden burst of energy. So this hormone basically increases the heartbeat, so that basically pumps the more amount of blood in your body, and of course blood carry oxygen, you get like more energy at that time. It also metabolizes the change of glycogen to glucose. So again, glucose is needed, or it's nothing but some form of energy, because the breaking down of glucose gives us like more energy. So these hormones basically make all those changes. So either you can fight the situation or you can run away from the situation. So you get sudden burst of energy because of adrenaline. We also sometimes call for the adrenaline rush when we are like into some situation or some sports like that. So this all happens. Now let's talk about thyroxine. Thyroxine is produced by thyroid gland, which is present in nothing but the throat region of our body, and they help in the metabolism, lipids, carbs, and fats. I think this is the very brief knowledge about it, and that is enough from, at least from the chemistry point of view. That is it. Thank you.